Hello and welcome everyone. My name is Rich Longo, Flycast Partners, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. Thank you for joining us for our presentation on common mistakes in information technology on BMC Client Management. And our presenter today is our very own Chris Bradfield. Now, Chris Bradfield is one of our senior consultants here at Flycast Partners. So he's one of the fellows that you'll see out there gallivanting around, helping out our customers. He'll be doing various things to assist them with whatever that might be with some of their BMC products. And Chris comes to us from BMC. He was with BMC for almost 10 years, probably been in this space getting pretty close to 20 years here shortly. So I hate to date you, Chris, but you've been in for a while here. And before we get started, Chris, let me introduce our organization. Flycast Partners is here to deliver a seriously amazing IT experience. We were founded and staffed by personnel that have many years of experience in the IT space. We took the best ideas from these collective experience and added the best components necessary to grow and become a leading value-added reseller in the North American IT market. We offer best-in-class implementation services and training in IT service management, IT asset management, IT operations management, workload automation, and batch processing, as well as enterprise service management, all using ITIL best practice. Our professional services team can easily scale up or down to meet the professional needs of any organization, regardless of size, complexity, or budgetary restrictions. We also offer implementation services both on-site and remote, as well as training to reinforce your company's long-term IT success. Our ongoing remote administration support service offerings will enable your organization to focus on those normal day-to-day operations, saving you both precious time and money. We would like to invite you to reach out to us at any time with any question or just looking for additional information at 844-FLYCAST. That's 844-359-2278. Or you can go to our website. Visit our website and chat live with one of our IT experts Monday through Friday during normal business hours. On our website, you can go check out various technologies that we offer, various types of training. You can go check out upcoming webinars that are right around the corner. You can see some of the folks that Flycast Partners has been working with over the years. You can also see some of the partners that we have here at Flycast Partners. So without further delay, I'm going to go ahead and turn this presentation over to the star of our presentation, Chris. Chris, here you go.
Hi, Rich. Thank you. And hello, everybody. Today, I wanted to spend a little time focusing on some common issues and common mistakes that we find with clients who are using the BMC Client Management tools. And to start with, I'm going to focus in, at least in this webinar, on the asset discovery portion, because that's one of the areas that we get a lot of questions about, and customers that I regularly work with sign up and purchase the product because the thought is and their goal is to discover what assets they have out there in their environment. And we regularly run into questions or concerns about the way the asset discovery works. So what we're going to do is we'll focus here on the asset discovery. So I have my screen here. I have the BMC Client Management system up and running. And if you're slightly familiar with the product, we have our asset discovery node over here. One of the common concerns or complaints that we get from users is that they have a lot of performance issues. So when they configure asset discovery, they will report that the discovery module is slow, and it takes a lot of time for them to get data back. And so we're going to focus on some ways to improve the performance and get better results back from asset discovery, and some of the ramifications for those adjustments that you can make. So when we look here, if you're familiar with asset discovery, we have the asset discovery node, and then under that we have configuration, which sets our base scan configurations, the scanners, which are your asset discovery devices, and then the devices that have been discovered. And you'll see here I have a few devices here. And yeah, actually we'll see a lot, and kind of amazing. This is at my actual home network here. So I'm kind of always surprised with the number of assets that I have sitting on my home network. Now, one of the things that directly impacts the performance of your scanner is how the scanner is configured. So if we come over here to the app configuration and we go to the module configuration, this is an area that I find a lot that admins don't take time to adjust and look at these settings here. And there's a few key things that they need to look at that will improve performance. And we'll double click here and I'll bring this up. Just the properties here of the parallel script items. This controls the number of scripts that the system runs on your backend server. So the more scripts that we can allow the server to run, the faster it will run. So if I hover over here, we'll see this little balloon tip come up, and by default it sets to normal. Generally, we'll recommend changing this to high, which will allow the server to run 20 scripts at one time, which is going to double, in theory, double the speed of your scan, because we're now allowing the asset discovery server to run twice as many scripts in scanning. So when it goes out, and I'm oversimplifying this, but when it goes out, instead of scanning 10 devices at once, it's going to scan 20 devices at once. And so we generally will always come here and recommend changing this to high. Now, the next two kind of settings here that are important are this max timeout value and this max inventory timeout. The max timeout value controls how fast a system, or how fast the system gives up when it's attempting to talk to a device. So when it scans, it in the back end, it's doing a network IP scan. So it's stepping IP address to IP address to IP address in your environment. And what occurs is when it finds a live IP address, it stops at that address and attempts to identify the device. So in this setting here, I have this set where it will sit at 5 minutes for a single host. Now, by default, the default settings can, depending on the version, the exact version you're on, could either be anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes. So what that means is by default, if it's a 30-minute setting, the scanner waits 30 minutes for a particular device to time out. That's the maximum timeout. And that, if you have, even if you have a simple network where you only have 250 IP addresses, if you took 250 IPs times 30 minutes, you can see how long that would drag out in the scan. So we generally will recommend setting this anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. And what that will do is allow your scan to proceed along faster. And the best part about this, or the basic thought behind this process, is that if the asset discovery module is unable to identify what a device is, pull inventory, whether it be hardware or software inventory for that device, in about 5 minutes, or get at least positive results from that device, it should just give up, that the device is not live or is not going to respond. So that's a key setting that will help improve your performance. The next one that we change, and this by default is a 6 hour, is the timeout before the system stops a particular scan. Now, for a single scan where you have a single network that you're scanning and a single IP range, having a timeout for 6 hours is fairly fine with a single simple scan. But if you have multiple IP ranges to scan with the same scanner, if I have that set to 6 hours, I need to allow at least 6 hour window between each scan. So if I started a scan at 12 p.m. noon, I could not start my next scan until 6:10, 6:15 p.m. because I would need to allow at least 6 hours for that scan to continue, because that's the maximum amount of time that a scan can run. So we generally will adjust this down to an hour or 2 hours. And the right value here is based on the number of IPs that you run. So you may start with, we usually will start at, 2 to 3 hours, maybe an hour to 1 to 3 hours, really kind of there, and then run a scan and make sure that it completes within that time. If it completes in an hour, we'll adjust this down to an hour. If the scan is artificially terminated before the results are done, we'll increment it up. But what you want to do is you want to adjust this to be as close as possible to your scan. That way, your scan results are configured and will run in the proper amount of time and not hang your scanner or prevent your scanner from starting another scan before one ends. So these are kind of the two, really right here, the two key things are here on the max timeout of your scan and the max inventory timeout. Those settings there will help perform your improve the performance of your scan. Now, additionally, we go down here and you'll see that the other area that people run into when it comes into what will cause their scans to run a little slow are whether we're getting hardware and software inventory back. Now, if you're not familiar with the client management product, BMC has the technology and the ability. So when it scans a network device, so if I come back over here and we look at it and I go BMC scanned a particular device, what it does, it has the ability to do an agentless inventory scan. So without an agent, it talks to the device, attempts to figure out the hardware inventory of the device, the hardware type, what operating system it has, and if appropriate, it will connect to the device and inventory the software on it. Where that is advantageous is in an environment where you go, I don't want to install the agent on a machine, but I need, for software compliance or inventory, I need software inventory from that device. So the scanner actually has the ability to log onto the device and pull a list of all the software that's installed. So in the case that if this was a workstation, I would have a software inventory tab and I could see what software was installed. Now, the problem with that, or the concern, it's not necessarily a problem, but the concern that you could have there is with this configured as yes for hardware and yes for software, that of course, that extra work lengthens the time of your scan. So that work means that the scanner logs onto the device, pulls the hardware, and pulls the software inventory from that device if possible. And that takes additional time. So where I'm going with that is depending on what your use case is for the scan, you may not need hardware and software inventory. So in fact, I was working with a customer last week that their use case for the scan was to identify devices on their network and then immediately roll the agent out to the device. So they were not using the scan to do any type of software inventory. And scans were taking 4 or 5 hours a scan. And what we did is we went in here and adjusted and disabled the hardware and software inventory from their scan. And that improved their scan performance dramatically because we were no longer telling the scanner to identify the hardware and software that is installed on a particular device. We just wanted the scanner to identify the device, identify the basic operating system of the device, and that's it. And that would allow us to do a rollout. So that will help performance too, is if you work on enabling or disabling the hardware and software inventory. Now, as a side note of this hardware and software inventory, this kind of leads into one of the other sections that I run into concerns about is licensing. We get a lot of calls, and a lot of times I'm working with clients, and they will find that when they look at inventory, they'll come over and they'll look at their software inventory of a device. And I'll just go over here. Go down to my device here. And they'll go over inventory. And they'll look at this and they'll find that, well, this device has an agent on it, but it does not have inventory. Of course, here I have inventory, but they'll come here and they'll find that this inventory tab is empty. And excuse me, I'm about to cough, pardon me. Sorry.
You're allowed to cough. You're allowed to even take a sip of water. Yeah. Go ahead.
My apologies. I'm going to take a sip of water here to see if I can get this cough to stop.
And
I always hate,
while Chris is
I
showing
always hate
us
coughing
folks,
in ears.
while Chris is showing us folks and coughing, go ahead and send in questions that you might have. We'll try and get any questions that we can answered within the time allocated. Okay, Chris, I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay. Right. And that'd be great. Thank you, Rich. So what they find out is that they'll find that they're missing inventory for devices. They'll come over here and they'll have agents on devices, and they'll come over here and they'll find that they're missing inventory. And when I'm looking at items, I'll come back and I'll look at their scans and I'll go, well, you're pulling back. They'll have this configured to do hardware and software inventory. Now, what occurs is, if you remember the licensing model of the BMC, and I'll come over here to the license section, you'll see that BMC licenses are broken up into basic modules. So we have the BMC agent license, and then we have an inventory license. What occurs is when you do a scan, if you scan, let's say you scan a subnet that has 100 devices on it, and there are, of these 100 devices, none of them have agents, but you scan that and you say pull back hardware and software inventory. The moment your scanner with this configured here for hardware and software inventory, the moment that it pulls back hardware and software inventory and attempts to pull that data back, you are going to use one of these inventory licenses. So even if you do not install the agent on the device, you use an inventory license. So what occurs, what I run into a lot of times, and again, I dealt with this recently last week with the client, that they were getting inconsistent inventory results. And what we found is that they had ran the system out of inventory licenses. And the concern was, well, they had, a couple hundred agent licenses free, but they had consumed all their inventory licenses, which meant that devices that were brought online were no longer able to send in inventory, even though they had agent licenses. So you have to remember that you can, and you'll see it here, I'm using more inventory licenses than I am agent licenses. Now you'll see I have an astronomical license count here on my demo system, but that's the difference, is that if I look at this, I'm storing inventory on more devices than I've actually installed the agent on. And that is quite normal. So one of the things after you have to remember is the way your asset discovery module is configured can impact your inventory licenses because of this setting here. So if I come back over here, this module setting where I come over here to your scanner modules, what we have here on hardware inventory and software inventory, that uses licenses. And it is quite common, I see this a lot, where clients they may buy 500 agent licenses and buy 800 inventory licenses, because you can buy those two licenses separately. And by getting more inventory licenses, they are able to scan their network and store the inventory on devices. So let's say I wanted to store inventory on the printers I had in the environment, maybe my network equipment, maybe some Linux equipment that I did not want to install the agent on, or in my case, you'll see I have Apple here. Maybe I want to get some inventory information and store details on that, but not install the agent. Having those additional inventory licenses allows the scanner to inventory devices, pull back hardware and software inventory, and store that. So that's kind of a side note of what these two functions here do. If you do not need hardware and software inventory from an agentless device, to be clear, meaning that you do not want to install the agent on a device and you do not want hardware or software inventory, you can dramatically improve your scan performance by disabling these two modules here, setting this to uncheck these two options, which sets it to no. And therefore, when the scanner runs, what it will do is it will talk to the device, get its IP information, get it the machine name, its network name, and store that information, but not inventory and move on. that will dramatically improve your scan performance, and having enough information and provide you enough information that you can do an agent rollout if you want to do an agent rollout. So just kind of the simple changes here in just this setting of the module configuration of your scanners can dramatically improve your scan performance. Now, a key note here, and I'm going to come over here and I'll go scanners, and I'm going to add a device, and I'll bring up another scanner here real quick to show you this setting here. I'll hit OK, and it'll take just a few moments. Key thing to note is that these settings are independent on each scanner. So we were looking at this scanner called App 1, and you'll see there's my settings. And you'll see DC1 is my next scanner that I just brought up, and you'll see it has different settings. It has the default settings for the version I'm on. So you can configure one scanner to act one way and another scanner to act a different way. So one of the key things you have to remember in your environment is if you have multiple scanners and you want to optimize performance, you need to check the configuration of each scanner and make sure it's set accordingly. So you may have, again, configuration where, and this is a common configuration, where a scanner scans your desktop subnets, which we're going to install agents on, and it does not do hardware and software inventory, but the scanner that scans my server subnets does do hardware and software inventory because I don't want to install my agent on it. Now, I personally think that the agent should be installed on any device in the environment, but a lot of folks will go for whatever reason. They don't want to install an agent on certain servers, but they can still do hardware and software inventory of those. So your configuration is a per scanner item. So that was kind of one of the things that I wanted to talk about today, is just give some insight on ways to improve the scan performance there. Another area that we run into in asset discovery around just general performance concerns is the configuration about when they're running a scan, how long and how many targets it talks to. So I come over here and I'll explain what I mean here. I have a automatic scan that was built. And if I come over here to sessions, you'll see that there were 252 sessions. This is based on network subnetting. So what we run into is a lot of times customers, and again, I'll speak real recent. I had this conversation yesterday, in fact, where a customer scanner had literally locked up and had used over 200 and some odd gig of disk space in hung log files. And what we found was that when you set a scanner up, you set a target list. Now, to effectively configure a scanner, the target list is the IP range that is going to be scanned. And the target list can be configured over here under Asset Discovery, Configuration Targets. And you'll see I have some examples here. Best practice and our recommended practice is when you're configuring your targets, configure them in the smallest IP block possible. So one of the key things that we try to train and kind of educate people about is use CDIR notation, which is, and I hope I get the abbreviation right, Classless Domain Internet Routing Notation. I hope I get that right. CDIR. And I just do this whenever I need it. I go out to Google and do a search for CDIR calculator. And what that is classless internet domain routing. Now, it's slightly off. And what this does is allow you to identify network blocks by, instead of doing, in this case, 10.000/24, instead of doing it 10.00 and then indicating comma 1, comma 2, comma 3, all 254 IP addresses in that range, the CDIR allows you just to place a /24 in. So /24 is 255 IPs and starts at 10.00 to 10.00255. Now, what I run into a lot is, and this was in the earlier this week that I ran into this, that the BMC administrators network guy said, well, just do a 10.10.0/8, which is, well, let's see, 16 million IPs. And the scanner locked up at a certain point. Now, there was some usage case where they was monitoring and didn't go back and check the monitoring logs. But what occurred was the scanner at some point had ran for about 5 days trying to scan all those IP addresses and experienced an error, and the log file started to grow and grow until it ran the disk space, system out of disk space. So what we tell people is to break this down as low as possible. So if I come back over here to my target list, what I always recommend is, you'll see when I build targets and I train everybody, I say, name your targets to be, easily identifiable. So this is a 192.168.1.0. And since the client won't allow me to do a slash or proper CDI notation in the name, I do a -24. This indicates that to me that's 255 IPs. And it makes it real easy from a training or configuration standpoint to see the range. Now, if I go in here, and I'll come over to targets, and I'm going to show you what happens when I try to put a -8 in here. So I'm going to go 192.168. Okay, and so that's what the network team provided the gentleman. And okay, you get a warning telling you the system will attempt to warn you and provide guidance that you should not configure it with that setting, because it's going, that's 16 million IPs, and it could cause high CPU and RAM usage. Now, in my opinion, that's a little overly generous when it says it could cause high CPU or RAM usage. Most likely that will lock the scan process up at some point in time, because what it will do is run the process out of memory. And at a certain point, the process will lock and your scan will never configure or never complete. So what we always recommend is splitting it up as small as possible. And now, unfortunately, this does take more time when you're configuring something. So if I had a /8, if I come over here and I just do a simple test, I'll go back here and 192.168.1.0, and I do a /20. You'll see it says it's just fine there. Now, if I want to know how many IP addresses that is, I just come back over here to my calculator. And again, Google has hundreds of these sites that you can find. That's 4,000 IP addresses. Now you go, well, that could take a lot of time to configure a /8. Well, very few customers and very few companies that I've ever worked with actually use a /8. So it does take some research and some time, but as a general statement, I recommend that when you configure these targets, a /20 is about as high as you want to go. That way, you're able to target the scans fairly easy, and you're able to control the configuration and make sure that you don't run your scanner out of memory. So kind of the next thing in performance is when you configure your targets, set these targets to be as small as possible, 4,000 to 8,000 IP at the most, and then set them multiple, and then you can build multiple. So I can come and configure these however I'd like and get them configured with the proper CDIR notation. And with that note, I also always recommend, let me go back over here, is you'll see that there's multiple ways to enter this. So I can come here and enter it as a CDIR notation, or I can go like 192 in the example there, 192.168.4.45-4.47 to say these IPs. I can configure it with by putting dashes in or anything, but we always recommend trying to always do this as CDIR notation. And the reason is because then it conforms to standard network notations and the standard way that in darn near every case a network is split up. Very rarely do I ever see DHCP servers or subnets configured to be smaller than a /24 network. And this is something that we always tell the administrators will be, you have to start with your network team and getting kind of an understanding of your network layout from whoever manages your network infrastructure. And then when you get that information, configure it in BCM, use your CDIR notation so it matches kind of the best practice there, and then set them up as small as possible. And that will help improve your performance of your scanners, because one scan of a large IP range will run slower than many scans of a small IP range. Because what happens on the back end is that when a scan starts, it starts the Nmap scan process on the server. It runs. When it ends, it flushes that process out of memory and starts a new one. So in small scans, you're running the scan, flushing the process, clearing the logs, starting the next scan, flushing it, clearing the logs, and stepping through. Whereas if you do just a very large scan, you're starting the process and you're running it hours and hours on time, and it's more likely to run that scan process out of memory. So we always recommend setting these up as small as possible, and then making sure that you configure the names in a format that you can easily read the notations there. One of the big things that I run into is, and this is across the product anywhere, is lack of naming standards. Develop a naming standard and follow it across, because now with this here, if I go with my targets configured with names that match the particular IP subnet that's under it, when I come over here, if I want to configure a new scan, I can just come over here, create scan. I'll just create a real quick scan. And I go to my target list. You'll see any person can easily look at this and go, oh, well, I need to scan the 24, the -24, or the -17 by just easily clicking the target I want. And I don't have to remember that I need to go over here, hit go to, go inside, and then look at this target to try to figure out how that's configured. I can see how it's configured right there in the name. So that's kind of another tip that I have in my notes here, or one of the things that we run into. And I keep using these because I've ran into this again, trying to think, within the last 2 weeks, where a new administrator took over for the system and there had been no naming standard for anything put. And we spent half our time backtracking configurations to try to figure out how things were configured. Because when we looked at everything, we had to go inside every process to figure out how it was configured, because each process, each setting was named differently. Use a naming standard across everything that you build here. All right. So those are kind of the things I wanted to talk about on the asset configuration, the asset discovery, is ways to improve the performance of your scan and ways to adjust the configuration to help control your license usage if you need that. And then a couple of things that I made for notes for today were to discuss, just to make sure that you understood, be very consistent about your naming and your configuration. A lot of times we work with customers who are in a hurry, and this comes back kind of to the target discussion again, and they will, either with targets, create ones with like a lot of IPs or something in it, because it gets them up and running very fast. And then after a certain point, they run into problems. Spend your time up front to get things configured right, as opposed to trying to just rush into it. This is a tool that, I always tell people this is my Spider-Man statement. I think it was Uncle Ben told Peter, with great power comes great responsibility. This is a tool that has a significant amount of power in your environment. I can do pretty much anything you can think of to an asset in my environment or to my environment. So I need to make sure that I do the legwork up front to get things configured right, and be slow and be careful about the way I configure it, especially around just the simple things about naming and the base setups, because it makes it so much easier in the future to dig through. And over time, you will end up with a lot of objects. Then, good segue into my next point is, I also tell people I recommend make sure that you have a process to clean up objects that you don't need, aren't using anymore. So if I come here and I go, well, we've retired, I go, well, after this webinar, I go, well, you're right, I need to make my subnet smaller, and I'm going to do everything with a -24. I'm going to make sure I come in here and I delete these objects here, because I go, I'm not needing them anymore. And I get my normal warnings. Clean up. It is very important, again, over time, because you end up with hundreds and hundreds of objects, whether it's scan targets, operational rules, software deployments, remote control recordings. Have a process in place to clean up and retire and remove old objects. But otherwise, again, you end up with so much stuff that you're trying to backtrack and figure out if this is appropriate. And I sound like a broken record here. Recently, I was working with a customer that had 4 or 5 Windows groups that were all kind of the same. And what was happening is that they were getting inconsistent software deployments. And what had happened is that they had 5 Windows groups that were slightly different each. And then when their admins would go in and deploy software, they go, oh, well, that says Windows in it. They grab it. So admin A would deploy to Windows Group A, admin B to Windows Group B, and there were missing machines. So software never was quite deployed consistently. That's where, again, it's very important to be very consistent about your naming, very consistent about your pattern, clean up stuff that you don't need. Now, and this will lead kind of like my last tip here that I've got scribbled on my notes here is BMC is very forgiving about the out-of-the-box objects. If I come over here and I go I'll just go under queries, for example, wherever I go, you'll find that, there's these sections that are called out-of-the-box. One of the things that I love here is that the system is very forgiving, that if I go into the out-of-the-box, and I go, well, I was listening to this webinar, and Chris said, clean up stuff that I don't need. So I'm going to go over here and I go, well, Windows, I don't have any Windows 95 or Windows 98 devices, Windows 8, whatever. I can come here. I'm going to just clean those up. We're not needing them, get rid of objects that I don't need anymore. Now, where I go Windows, where BMC is very forgiving is if I come across a point that somebody goes, well, wow, we need that out of the box object, or you shouldn't have got rid of that, or you shouldn't have changed it. The nice thing about this tool is if I come up here, you're going to see that I have a step under Tools, Import Out of the Box Objects. I select my language, and this will bring up a list of all of the built-in objects. So you'll see there's that 32-bit Windows query right there. It's right there. So when I recommend cleaning up the objects in the device to help make sure that you don't have a lot of objects sitting out there, or a lot of objects, especially sitting out there that other admins may not understand what they're looking at, and select the wrong object to deploy software to or to get a report or something. Even clean up, I always recommend even clean up the out-of-the-box objects that you're not going to use. Because if you come across the point that you need it, you can rebuild it. And you'll see I can sort by name here, type, and you'll see that here are all of the out-of-the-box objects. So if I go, I set up my demo system and again earlier, and I'm going, well, I could get rid of these device groups or these administrator groups because I don't use them. I tie my system to Active Directory. If I, for instance, ever need those, I could come here and just check that. Let me do one that I'll get rid of this one. So it's right there on top. Tools, import out of the box object. Okay. Go name. And of course, it's not going to sort for me again. So I'll just walk through here. I'll select OK. Or I could select all and then hit OK. And what it will do is, now this will take a little bit to run and I will have to reboot my service. But what occurs is in the back end right now, my server is rebuilding the out-of-the-box objects. And then at a certain point, you'll see, well, I refresh and you're seeing that some of the objects are returning. So there's the 32-bit. There's that. So I'm getting lucky and I have to reboot. Now, what I would really want to do to just make sure that everything was clean at a scheduled time, I'd want to restart my BCM service on the master server just to make sure that I restarted it and everything was clean. But you will see that all of my objects are returning that I deleted. So where I'm going with that is I will regularly come in here and say, well, we know that I don't have any Windows XP. I don't have these here. And I will clean out these objects because that allows me to make sure that I have a clean setting. So if another admin comes in here and is working along and I go, well, just use a simple example. Go over to my packages and go under Microsoft and been helped a customer write a Microsoft Edge for the new Edge browser deployment. And I tested it earlier and they go, well, they want to deploy it. They can come right over here. And what I want to avoid by keeping these objects clean is I want to avoid somebody coming in here and go, well, I need to deploy this browser, and they go assign device group or however they're going to assign it. And they go to this list of devices and they select the wrong one because there are two that are closed or there's an old deprecated one that you just didn't delete and they selected to the wrong one. Because then what occurs is either, at the end, the project manager, whoever asked for the deployment or the customer that asked for the deployment didn't get the software and you told them that they should get it, or it goes to the wrong set of people. Something like that. All of those things can just make your processes and make your product look bad in the eyes of your customer, make you look bad. So therefore, cleanup is very important. Out of everything I've discussed so far today, cleanup and naming are probably the number one and number two things that I would train and teach and harp with the new admins and experienced admins that I work with over and over, because I cannot tell you the number of times in the years that I've been doing this that difficulties that we've ran into or time that we've lost when I'm working with customers in trying to find what we're looking for or backtrack something because naming standards weren't used or something like that. So those are kind of like my tips for today. So, Rich, any questions or anything that we want to touch on?
Yeah, the biggest question that I have for right now is, can you hear me there, Chris?
Oh, yes, I can, sir.
Okay, just making sure there. It didn't look like my audio was working. The biggest question I have now is everybody seems to be dealing with a lot of folks that are working remote now, and it's putting a strain on their organization. Can you talk a little bit about what client management can do to help out that situation, to help them they deal with these folks that are out working remotely right now.
Absolutely. I think that's a big thought on everybody's mind. I touch on that. I stop and think, I work from home most of the time, or I'm at customer site. So I'm very used to working at home, but right now we have all of these, in IT, we have all these customers, all these people who are working from home right now. And where client management the two areas that client management, excuse me, I'm going to cough again, one moment. And no, I'm not sick. I probably hear this a lot, but I was working with somebody last week and they were going, well, are you sick? I go, no, it's my sinuses. I actually had a note from my doctor just to make sure that, because I was working with a customer on site, that, I've been to the doctor, it's my sinuses, we're clear. And they said, we appreciate that type deal. But the areas that it can really help you a lot is in remote user assistance. So client management, if you have the appropriate licenses, so I'm going to come over here and I look at my licenses. If I have the agent installed on a machine and I have this remote control license, I can do remote support for any of my users as long as I can open a network connection to their machine. Now, a lot of customers, that means that you have to have a VPN connection. Now, generally, yes, in most instances, BMC to remote control a machine means that the end users, of course, the end user's desktop has to be up and they have to have network connectivity between your machines. But I can come over here and I'll go over down here to my devices. And let's say this is my domain controller here. I can come over here and do a remote control session. And this is a new install, so we'll see if I've done it right. Remote control. And do a remote control of that machine. So right there, I'm using what's doing my inventory, my patching, and everything. I'm doing a remote control. Now, where I could take this even further is if I build out my infrastructure, because I said when I started this, Rich, is that you have to have some VPN connectivity. BMC's client management infrastructure can work over the internet. So I could literally configure my environment where I could do remote management of off-network devices, where as long as I had configured my systems to have an internet-facing relay and set things correctly, I could do remote access and so forth for a machine that as long as they were on the internet, I could do this. They did not have to VPN. Because one of the things we're running into a lot, and a buddy of mine works at a large company here in the town I live in, and their VPN infrastructure is overloaded. And so what they're doing is trying to expose more of their applications to just straight internet facing to take some of the load off their VPN infrastructure. And so the BMC client management tools can be configured where they don't need VPN connectivity to work. But from here, I have full remote control of the device. And of course, I don't do the remote control a lot. I'm forgetting the remote control, the auto. Where's my control alt delete? You'd think, and all of this remote control is the module that people use a lot, but it's actually the module that I actually get in the least, because it's once you get the agent installed, it's fairly well configured. But remote control is real simple. It's all agent based on the agent being installed on the system. So what this would allow us to do is, if you have your client management infrastructure already out there in the environment, and maybe you haven't used remote control, but already have the licenses for it, you could instantly start training and using remote control for remote support. If you have the agent installed but don't have the remote control, all you would have to do is update your licenses to include remote control. And you can configure your licenses to say, I'm only going to remote control a certain number of machines. So maybe I have 1,000 agent licenses, but I only, and this is common, I only want to remote control 500 of those, the end user devices. And you could do stuff like that. So there's a lot of tweaking that can be done there. Now, let's say you already have the agent installed the remote control licenses, but just go, well, I need to be able to do off VPN connection, non-VPN connection support. Well, we can certainly help assist getting your environment configured where you have internet-facing relays and update your agents so they will talk over the internet. And that way you're taking some of the strain off of your VPN connections. That allows you to remote control and provide remote support, because a lot of our end users are out there, and these are the first times that they've really taken their laptop home and are using it a lot from home. And day to day, where they used to be in the office working, they'd call, maybe a technician would run out and help or something. Now they're calling the help desk and they need help, and we may not have the tools in place to help that. Now, another area that it can help absolutely is around the other direct access functions. So I have remote control. Additionally, I have BCM allows you to have direct access with the appropriate license to any device. So you'll see I have the agent here. I can come over here, you know, talking to the user, they have a problem. I can come out here, pull the log files, browse there. This is real-time browsing of the file system. If I need to restart a service, check something, if it's running, I can see their services. I can, their Windows event log, their processes running on their machines. So in short, kind of, Rich, the client management from a remote access gives our IT team full and direct access to a end user's computer. And depending on the configuration, they can do that whether they're online or online, meaning on the network, on VPN, or be configured to do it over the internet. So that there's a lot of flexibility for connectivity. So that's kind of one of the real big ways. And another way that I can think of that would be helpful, again, that since we have a lot of people who are working from home and they may not necessarily have all the tools that they need, would be around our application deployment module. So if I come over here to the packages, you know, and I set this up just a little bit earlier today, I can come over here and quickly package a piece of software up and deploy it. So I can quickly go, well, you know, a user calls from home and says, well, I need Google Chrome. This site that I'm working on needs Google Chrome. Didn't know I need it. I could easily and quickly package up Google Chrome and deploy it to their system. And if I already have it packaged, I just as simple as coming over here and assigning their device. And then what happens is that the system will roll it up to their device. So those are kind of the two things, Rich, that I can think of that would be directly relevant right now to supporting a large shift in workers working from home and taking systems home, whether that be their laptops or loaner equipment, stuff like that.
I think that was great, Chris, and I think that helps out a lot. And this whole presentation, I have to say, you brought up a lot of things that I hadn't thought about with BMC Client Management. And you know, I've known the tool now for just over 7 years, and you brought up some things that I hadn't thought of. So I thank you for that. This is a great presentation. And I want to thank the audience for taking time out of your busy schedule. I know everybody's super busy right now and running in a million directions with everything going on in the world today. So I really appreciate you taking time to spend with us here today at Flycast Partners. It's very much appreciated. I encourage you to reach out to Flycast Partners with any questions that you have at all, any assistance you may need. Reach out to us at 844-FLYCAST, that's 844-359-2278, or visit our website, chat with our IT experts live if you don't feel comfortable talking on the phone. They'll be happy to help you out Monday through Friday during normal business hours. You can also email us at info@flycastpartners.com. Once again, we'll be happy to assist you with that. So folks, be safe out there, okay? Until our next webinar, we'll see you then, and have a good one.